fighters? I'm coming back at you with another Friday weekly wrap up where we talk about the news, politics, current events, etc., etc. So if you're new here and you're into that, definitely drop a like and share the video. And if you like the content and you feel a need to subscribe, that would greatly help the channel. But anyway, man, we're going to talk about some more Dan Bongino, Cash Patel drama. Which this is going to be the last time I'm going to talk about them because my last what is it now? 2 or 3 videos have been about them, but they've been, running the headlines as of late. And they keep coming up doing new interviews, and pretty much everyone's talking about them. We'll get more into, the geopolitical World War III updates. Trump and Putin are now at odds where they look like they were, being friends. But is that just what they want you to see? That's all part of the theater. We'll talk more about that. But I wanted to talk again, like I said, touch more on the Dan Bongino, Cash Patel thing, and just about everyone. Like I said, I really can't point to a single podcast. I talked about in some previous videos about the PBD podcast and the quartering and stuff like that. But just about everybody in the political landscape has talked about, what has happened to these two. And by those two, I mean Dan Bongino, Cash Patel, who were supposed to be hawks and ending corruption and dismantling the FBI and all this stuff. And they've been coming down and doubling down in these newer interviews, again saying that, he didn't take himself out and all this. But, the bigger question is, why do they fold? And my rule of three, that they're either stupid, scared, or complicit. And, you know, I guess, and what I've always said, like, what happens to these people, I've always said it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? Like the guy in the black suit pulls you aside into the alley and gives you a talking to, behind closed doors, and tells you, this is what happens. And I talked in the previous video how Dan looked really scared, and uh it looked, they probably threatened him or something like that. But I said, that wouldn't really, I, that wouldn't shake me, I guess. And I don't think Dan would be shaken at that. I mean, when you take these jobs, I mean, it's kind of part of the description, right? Like you're like, I'm a soldier. I placed myself in this position. I'm in the war. You know what the stakes are. Like, yeah, they could try to kill you. They could take you out. That's part of the job, and I don't think that's what he was afraid of. But then people were talking about, no, I think they threatened, his family, and Dan Bongino has a daughter. I don't think Cash has kids, or I'm not too sure, but they could have said like, yeah, your daughter goes missing one day on the way to school, and she's gonna forever spend her life in a dungeon, getting who knows what done to her. And that would more explain the look on his face and the sickened look that he had. But another good point that I wanted to bring about was actually on the Tim Pool podcast, where he said it could be an overall threat to government, that they just can't put this kind of news out without the markets crashing and everything coming down. And it would just be the arrest of too many high level people. And you can always replace someone, right? Like, who was that recent they arrested one of the CEOs for like insider trading or something like that. But it's no problem when something like that happens. Or one of the basketball CEOs passed away or something, like, or not basketball. I think that was an NFL team. Um, but either way, and like the Mangione case where he took out the United Healthcare CEO, like, and that was a big one. I mean, that guy's like, I think that's a top 10 company. Um, and everyone's replaceable and they can always replace a CEO or whatnot, but not all at once is the point, I was getting to, or they were getting to in the podcast was, if you take all the Fortune 500 companies or all these people are, blackmailed by this, um, like, what are even the top companies? I can't remember, like Coca-Cola, McDonald's or something. I don't even know if they're even top in the country or if those are the world markets, but they're either way, you get what I'm saying. They're top level companies. And then if you take all these CEOs, all these politicians mainly, and there was a report that came out that they broke up some ring in Washington D.C. I think can't remember if that was a couple years ago or whatnot, but I read that. Yeah, I feel like I read that a while back, and they were like, it had ties to a lot of politicians, and there were like people in that area um was searching Google and stuff like that the most for escorts and stuff like that. So these people are highly compromised. I would bet on at least half of them being compromised. I mean, imagine if you lost half of Congress and senators and um, people within the social, or not social, but Secret Service, aides, cabinet members, all these people who were entrenched, and you were tasked on arresting all these people at once. You couldn't replace all these people. Government agencies would come crumbling down. The whole system would come crumbling down. Markets would fall. Everything, and I mean that's what it comes down to, and it's continuancy of government or contingent of government. I forget exactly what they call it, but and that's what it is. And if you don't know about that, it is a real thing. And governments have a plan in place. And there was a recent Canadian prepper episode where he talked about that. He was talking about, I forget the guy's name, but he was a bunker builder or he was running some kind of doomsday bunker company, and he was talking about that that they're pretty squared away, and he was like, the only threat to us is pretty much government. And Nate Canadian Prepper was talking about, well, yeah, same with us. We've had like all these plans in place, but government in Canada especially actually has laws in place that they were like, oh yeah, we'll seize all your stuff and just pretty much come and take what we want. And I think there's variations of that in America as well. So it basically comes down to, and that's what we talk about in general with the um, the overall bureaucracy of government. It's a big club, and you and I aren't in it. They're not looking out for you. They're all looking out from them, and it doesn't matter left or right. They're all feeding the beast. They're all feeding into that one system that they're a part of, and their goal is to keep it going because that's their meal ticket. And you and I are on the complete opposite spectrum of that. So, and if you don't, definitely, like I said, look into it. They've been running drills and stuff like that. I don't know if you remember that helicopter crash that happened early on in the year that ran into that plane. That helicopter, again, people call you a conspiracy theory that there's Black Hawk helicopters running around running government contingency drills. That's literally what it was doing. And they were planning for they've been running simulations and plans for the fall of America when things go, maybe a president ends up going down, which we've seen an attempt on that already, or mass civil unrest during a civil war situation, suspending habeas corpus, taking all your rights. We've talked about all this and how they keep government afloat. Jade Helm was the one that was big back in the day. We've talked about the FEMA camps and all their plans with that. It's to push you, to keep you in line, and then keep their criminal racket running. That's what it's all about in the continuance of government, and that's why they don't, put this stuff out, and that's why they fold. That's why these so-called, patriotic warriors, these people who you think are gonna be freedom fighters, go in there and throw a dud. And that's why I've always said, man, I don't hold any faith in these people. And even though Cash Patel and Dan Bongino looked, like great candidates, and I really wanted Matt Gaetz, but I didn't really hold any, hope up. I'm sure I would have been disappointed, right? I'm sure Matt Gaetz would have gone in there and done the same thing, and we would have been like, what was all that, tough talk he was talking on podcasts and all this stuff about, how he wasn't afraid to be, lead the arrest and lead the investigations and, take down the deep state, and none of that is gonna happen. And I'll definitely, we've talked about that before, but I definitely, need to do more videos exactly on that. But there's also new information coming out on the Epi files. Like I said, Dan and Catch been doing more interviews, and Dan came out. You remember how they said that um that the cameras malfunction or the cameras went down? Well, now he's saying no, that was a camera, single, not plural. And he's like, there is footage of not his exact moment, but of the hallway and stuff like that in the prison. And they say, I guess maybe on his door, but he said nobody came in and nobody went out. And people are already speculating that they're going to give you, an AI production, but they don't even need to do that. Like they can set up that camera right now on what was his door and in that hallway, and run a Hollywood production film of, what was going on. So no one's the trust has been broken, right? Nobody's going to believe whatever they put out. And it just goes to the previous things where, that I've talked about, that none of this stuff is coming through fruition. And the other thing they were talking about was Fort Knox. A lot of people have been bringing that up recently too. Like, where's the Fort Knox audit? What happened to that? That just completely broke out of the news cycle. It's because they don't plan on doing it. And if they do now, are you going to trust them? It's going to be another theater. Again, it's one of those, Trump used to always say, like, when you go on the offensive or you're going to attack a country, why do you broadcast it? Why would you ever broadcast, like, hey, at this time and place, we're planning on, attacking this, and this is what we're going to do? You just hit it. And I never understood that about this Fort Knox thing, where they broadcasted it and basically told them to get ready. And now you've given them months worth of time to, plate bars or set up a couple rooms to look good, and all this stuff. You should have just one day came on there and said, hey, on so and so date, on a Friday or Monday morning, we've got big news and we're going to be live, and tune in. And then just show up and, go in there with they have x-ray scanners and stuff like that, test the bars, pick out random ones, drill through them, and do a full audit. But again, what the topic of the video is contingency of government. If that came out bad and they found out that the gold wasn't there, that there were fake bars, fake gold, markets would crash, everything would fall, and it would all go down. Everyone would realize they're living a lie, and what they're telling you is a lie, and that's what they can't have going down. That they are going to keep this beast running, which one of my previous videos I was talking about. They are going to kick the can down the road as long as they can, because the road is paved with gold. No pun intended, for them. They are, keeping the system propped up and running their racket. But man, that's pretty much where I'm gonna wrap it up here for now. And let me know what you guys think. And as always, till the next one, you know what it is, man. We are on our own. Nobody is coming to save us. So get right with God, because only God can save you. Freedom Fighters out.